Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today no matter what it is you're doing. For the free tutorial today I'd like to share a deceptively simple Yin Yang pendant with you. Now there are a couple of different ways that you can finish that and I will go through both of those options after we've made the basic pendant shape. Let's head down to the board and take a closer look. So I have a couple of examples of the Yin Yang pendant that I'd like to share with you today. One has simply been wound together, bound with some finer wire, and I'll show you that technique. You could of course take that all the way along those connecting sides. The other has been infilled with small blue beads. Now the idea of the Yin Yang pendant is to represent balance, opposition, interdependence, and you can take a little time if you want to find out more by heading to your favourite internet browser, but I absolutely love this form. So we're going to create the simplest form possible and then I will show you how you can create these two types as well. I'm beginning today with 24 inches of 1mm gauge or 18 gauge wire. This is a medium to soft copper I'm working with. My advice would be to use a medium to firm copper, but this is the one that I have available to me right now. I'm going to start over close to one end and just give that wire a lovely warm through. You can see that this is already quite soft and warm, and I'm just holding on to a couple of inches, 2 to 3 inches at one end, which I'm going to turn away at an angle now, and this can be used to make your hanging loop or bail if you're going to use this as jewellery. So I'm just going to turn that up at 90 degrees for the moment. You can use whatever round form you have available, always remembering that the round form you use will be smaller than your final pendant unless you size it down, and I'll show you why. We're going to wrap the first section of wire now around my chosen round form, which is a little bead box that I had to hand, with the remainder of these blue beads in it. So once I have created that form, what can happen is that as soon as you release, the tension comes out of it and you end up with something that's just slightly larger. Now if you've chosen a good solid round form, one of the things you can do to repeatedly make that same size is to create a good solid round form, create that right angle up at the top here, and then what we're going to do is to grip hold of that crossover point like so on the long tail of wire. I'm just going to drop that down for a second and put a little bit of a bend in it, draw that back around. So we've circled around that upright quite softly for the moment, and we're just going to pop that back onto the round form. Now all we're doing here is just a little bit of tightening by hand. If you are working with a firmer wire, you might like to pinch that up with your pliers like so, and we've just looped around it one time. So now we can get rid of our round form for a second. If you're working with super soft, super floopy wire like I am today, you might even like to give that a little bit of a gentle hammering. So I'm going to grab my chasing hammer and just apply a few short taps with this to get a little bit of strength into that frame. You'll see that I've dropped the edge like so, so that when I strike down, I'm not causing any anger or squishiness to happen up at that little joint at the top there. I'm just looking for quite light, short blows, just to give me a little extra strength. I'm simply pulling the other section up and out of the way for a moment, and dropping the other half of that circular form onto the block. Now if you are working with a medium to firm wire, it's unlikely you'll even need to take this step, but just in case you're in the same situation I have, where the wire you're working with is soft, that's how we can overcome the design idea. So what we're going to do now is to draw this wire softly now, give that a little bit of heat and warmth. Sometimes when you're hammering wire, the hardness can travel along a little bit, something sciencey to do with electrons that I don't really know what I'm talking about, so I won't. So all we're going to do is to re-warm this first couple of inches, probably going to be around about 4 or 5 inches that I'm just warming through, but I really do want that to be as soft as possible, especially if I'm working with a firmer wire. So we're now going to take a round form half the size of the first one that we use. Now you can get sciencey and measure that if you want to. What I'm going to do is to just pop my ring mandrel in until it looks like it's about halfway across that circle. That looks almost, yeah, I'd say that's close enough. So what we're going to do is just hold the circle on the ring form or the round form at the relevant position. I'm just going to hold that like so and then draw the wire across. Now if I drop the ring form out of the way for a second, you'll see that it doesn't sit quite right yet. That's absolutely fine. We're going to warm through again. You could mark your round form or your ring mandrel, or you could use something that you know is exactly half the size, and you'll get a much more exacting situation if you do. So once I've got the other half sitting in position, I want the round form to sit around about at 6 o'clock on that design, so that I can very gently just pinch it into place and draw that wire back around. Kind of tough to show you on the camera, but if I just withdraw that very gently, you'll see that we've made the basis of our yin-yang form. Now you can obviously take a lot longer and you won't have a camera just here, and it will be a little bit simpler for you. So that is an option for you to undertake. Just take your time and make sure that you're happy with that round form. Now, in order to get this to sit, we just need to push it very, very gently so that it sits down inside that circular form. And that's the basis of the design. It's so simple when you break it down and look at it. Now, in order to get a really nice, smooth, round form that's going to sit all the way around the one side, down the yin side, which is the dark side or the filled side on this case, I'm just going to grab back my little box of beads, and I'm just going to use the very, very lowest section just to push that wire around so that I get a very similar circular frame. Now there are a couple of different ways that you can finish this design off. What I've done in these two designs just here is I have taken the wire all the way up to the top and I've just trimmed it away where it crosses the smallest point of the yin-yang design. If you want a little bit more security, you can take that wire all the way up to the top. I think that's what I'm going to demonstrate to you now, because I've got plenty of wire left to play with. What we're going to do is pinch very firmly on the non-dominant side and draw that wire around just a couple of times on the neckline. So if I just trim that away now, I had much more wire than I needed. I probably could have got away with around about 18 inches of wire using a ring box, which is about 2 inches across, I would say, give or take. If you don't want to have that extra line up at the top because it means that your wires cross over, the other alternative is to do as I have done here, and I'm just going to trim that back now. So if I open this all the way back up, you can tighten that up if you prefer. Let's just open that all the way back up. What I'm going to do is to truncate the wire just here. Now you must of course be conscious to truncate the correct wire and nothing that you don't want to trim away. So what will happen now is I will simply give that a little bit of a warm and ask that to sit down inside the main circular frame. You get a slightly smoother finish with this design if you choose to, as I have done here, trim. But like I showed you before, you can take that all the way back up to the neck and circle around if you prefer. Next up, I'm going to show you how to make a simple wrapped loop bail or hanging loop up at the top, and then I'll show you how you can complete the circuit down one side by weaving everything together. So just up at the top here, I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers, pop a little forward bend just above that loop, like so. It doesn't need to be super firm and tidy, but we are going to fill this tiny little bit of neckline in just a second. I quite like to make oversized loops for my hanging loops because it means I can put any threading or any chain material through there, but you can make that whatever size works for you. So I've just used a set of multi-step bail making pliers to get a nice round form. What we're going to do now is support that round form, just across the circular section, and we're going to fill this segment, and what that will help to do is to stop this piece from moving around quite so much. So let's just draw the wire around. Again, it does help if you pre-warm. We're just going to continue moving until we have filled that gap. Now you can obviously add on any swirls and things that you like at the top. I actually think I'm going to make one quite clean and swirl-less today. So let's just go one more time, I think, around that neckline with the tail of wire, just supporting that round loop up at the top. I think that's probably enough, so we're going to trim away, looking twice before cutting, and then just snuggling away that last little section of cut wire, and everything will start to sit a little bit better once we start weaving the side into position. So that's quite nice and neat and tidy. We can just get that to sit a little bit more smoothly, like so. Give it a squish and you're all good to go. So what we're going to do next is to get the yin side, the filled side, to just sit inside that circular form and start drawing everything together. If you do, like I have just now, slightly pull that off round, you can take a second to just pull everything back into true. You're working with wire, so most things, if you take your time, will come back together for you. So I'm going to be working with some gold colour wire this time, and if you wanted to fill the entirety, I would say you'd probably need about 36 inches to do so. I'm just going to cut a small section and show you the basic technique for filling that in. If you did want to fill the entirety of down here all the way down the side, which will look lovely, I've just done a segment on this side, but you could fill from top to bottom, you'll need quite an extensive amount of wire. Now what I tend to do when I'm working a design like this, to make the wire last as long as possible, if I want to fill the entirety, I will have cut a goodly long length, at least 36 inches. But I tend to start halfway along the bit I want to weave and just on the outside section. So we need to just push the tip of the wire through. And what I'm going to do is wind 3 times around the outside of the frame only. So if I push the tip through like so, that's one good wrap, 2 good wraps, obviously put your good eyes on, a 3rd wrap, and these are nice, neat, tidy, tense coils. And if you are exactly halfway along your finer gauge wire, and again this is 26 gauge or 0.4 millimeter, I think I've done one too many there, so I'll just push that back through in a second. Let's just lift that back through underneath. There we go. So I've got my 3 rotations around just the outside now. What I'm going to do is to draw the 2 sections that I want to support together. And if I'm halfway along my fine wire, I want to be halfway along the distance that I am looking to bind together. So let's push all of that wire through down the centre, and then back around the outside and continue with another 3 wraps. Now you of course can create any little patterns that you like. What I would say is always start by wrapping around only the outside, that complete circle on the outside, because what can happen if you bind it together, the 2 sections together, first of all, you then won't be able to get your wire through the gap and it can look a little bit lumpy and ungainly. So I've got my 3 wraps, so I'm going to go around both of those wires again now. Like I say, you can play around with your patterns. Do just start by wrapping only around the outside. With a design like this, which is a 3 and 1 rotation or wrapping, it's really nice to be able to repeat it, and you can repeat it in any direction. So once you've got to the end of your wire and you've come all the way to the top on the one side, you can flip it over and start moving in the opposite direction. Now there are 2 ways you can get your wire to pass through. You can either, as I did on the first side, take the end of the wire up inside, or you can push that leading edge up between those 2 wires, pull the wire tight against the preceding wrap. So that's 1 around the outside, push that up inside the 2, a 2nd rotation, push the wire up inside, and a 3rd rotation, pull the wire all the way around both of them again. Another way that you can complete this is to draw the wire across the back, pull it up inside the opposing segment, so underneath this yin side, up inside the yang side and draw the wire around and through. Now there are various merits to each of these techniques. They will wear the wire in slightly different ways, but if you are gentle, each of them will work as well as the other. So you can see I'm pulling the tail of the wire up now. It might be easier if you struggle with fine vision for you to take the wire all the way across the back. But we've done our 3 wraps, so we're going to wrap now around both of them before we continue along with wrapping just around the outside wire 3 times. So that works in this direction really, really well. It is an alternative to either pushing the leading edge up through or pushing the very, very tip of the wire through. So in this direction, you'll continue down to the 6 o'clock point. And in this direction you will stop just when you get to the cut end. Now if you did, like myself, slightly unround your design, you might need to take a second just to get that neck section straight, and also to very, very cautiously just pull this back round, and you'll find that 9 times out of 10 you're able to get a really good look just with a little bit of manual manoeuvring. You might find that you need to trim a tiny little bit extra as things move as you are creating. That's absolutely fine, and the design allows for that. So I'll show you what I mean. You might get all the way to here and you'll find that the very, very cut end, if I just lift that with my nail, is a little bit too long. All I'm going to do there is just trim that end section away, again ensuring that I'm only cutting the correct piece of wire. I want it to finish off just in between those other 2 sections, and if you like you can finish your wrap with the wire that's coming up in this direction by going 3 or 4 times around just the outside. So I've chosen to just do a small section, and that leaves this a little bit floppy and soft, but it's enough to demonstrate the technique and what that 3 and 1 wrap will look like. So if you imagine that that runs all the way from the top, finishing off with 3 wraps around just the outside frame, and then 1, 3, 1, 3 all the way around to that 6 o'clock position, you'll end up with a nice secure pendant. Now I did also just want to very quickly show you what it looks like if you make it in the Deanie. It looks really beautiful made small. The reason I haven't demonstrated in this size is because it makes it very difficult for you to see what's happening. For this, I used a marker pen to create each side of the yin and the yang, and I used the largest section of my ring mandrel to create the overall shape. So that will make quite a nice little necklace, perhaps a nice little pendant, or even a charm for somebody. And you would complete that in exactly the same way as I've shown you with the weaving here and here. So it's a recognisable shape, but with the yin yang it's really lovely to express that difference between light and dark, between forcefulness and between passiveness. There's a lot to love about this symbol, so I'm going to show you in the next short section of the video how you can colour one side and leave the other side with that negative space, which looks beautiful against the skin but equally can be used in decor both for inside the house and up the garden. So on the beaded yin yang pendant, I started by rotating my finer gauge wire, and again I'm using 0.4mm 26 gauge, probably for this size around about 36 inches again. It's quite a lot of wire and it can be a little bit tricky. What I didn't do on this pendant is any of the weaving down the side. What I instead did was started by rotating 3 times around just the outer frame, loaded on a bead, and then went over the top, so from the top to the top, rotated 3 times around and took a naked pass underneath, so no bead on the back, all the way back to the frame. Now I am going to demonstrate that for you, but there are 2 ways that you can approach this. You can go for this lovely extra bit of weaving down one side and then add your beads on the other side. It takes more work, but it has a really lovely finish if you do that. Or you can keep it to one side, and instead of doing any of the weaving down the one side, you can simply add the beads and that will hold everything together. So it depends whether you want a completely clean single pass of wire on the yang side, or whether you want to have that woven section on the yang side and then fill the yin side with beads. So it's entirely up to you how you proceed. I'm just going to show you. Starting at the narrow end is best, and this is how it will work if you're going to pop that into the side without the extra section of wire. So let's imagine that I've cut myself a good 36 inches of wire. Now it's a lot of wire to deal with, and if you run out part the way through, it's perfectly easy to add more on. So what I'm going to do is to lay my finer gauge wire, and again 0.4mm 26 gauge, approximately 30 to 36 inches, and I'm going to wrap it 3 times around just the outside with the tail, with the long length of wire coming over the top of the design. Now I might just employ my little pliers just to help me get 3 neat rotations. So we're looking for 3 visible rotations, which means we can trim away that teeny tiny bit on the back, and then we'll just make sure that it's nice and tidy by just pushing that wire up inside the frame. What we're going to do then is to scooch that all the way down towards the narrowest end of the aperture that we're looking to fill. Let's get some of these out the way. Would have been handy if I'd remembered to open the beads. So this doesn't move up incrementally. You don't have 1 bead, then 2 beads, then 3 beads. It starts out that way, and then when you get past the kind of the tipping point, you can start adding 2 or 3 beads at a time to fill the gap. So just go with what feels best. You don't have to follow a set pattern. It also depends entirely on your beads. I'm using small 2mm puffy rondelle style beads, and I'm just going to fit the first one into position. Now whilst I'm sat holding this, if I was going to repeat the design I did here, which again there's no weaving on the opposite side, I'm doing all the holding together in one swift move. It's exactly the same. I'm starting by rotating 3 times around just the frame, adding my bead 3 times around the far side, which I'm going to do right now, and we're moving towards the empty space. So let's just push that wire all the way through, and I'm going to pull that around and over the top. So that's 1 wrap all the way through again, 2 wraps, and all the way through until I have that 3rd wrap. Now every time I do 3 wraps, I'm going to tidy them up and draw the wire across the back without a bead. Now you can, if you want to go to the greatest of lengths, get some teeny tiny little beads and stuff them in the end if you have them in the same colour. You can do it all in teeny tiny beads and you'll be able to get just a little bit closer. I'm not overly worried about it. The effect is generally pretty good and I enjoy how it looks. The naked pass of wire comes across the back. Now if I'm doing the all-in-one manoeuvre, what I'm going to do at this stage is this little section just here. Let's tilt that in the light, and what I've done is I've wrapped 3 times around the outside and the cut end. So if I hold it up like so, I've wrapped 3 times around the frame, added a single bead 3 times around the inside, across the back without a bead, and then I'm going to wrap 3 times to join those 2 pieces of wire, these 2 sections together very, very firmly before I load my next 1 or 2 beads and repeat over and over again. So I'm going to do a couple of those with you. There are merits to doing this either way. If you choose to weave all the way along the outside, you get a really good sturdy pendant and it looks beautiful. If you are limited on time and wire, you can do it all in one go and just set your chosen teeny tiny beads, your seed beads, in position. So let's just flip that over. Pass of wire across the back of the design, no bead. Pinch the whole thing so that you're constantly checking everything is sitting exactly how you want it to finish up. Pinch that into position, wrap 3 times around the outside of the frame. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Point the wire back across the segment that you're looking to fill. We're now going to load a couple of beads. I think maybe 2 will fit, but if 2 don't fit, it doesn't matter. It just depends on exactly how much curve you put into that end bit. And just remember that handmade jewellery is just that, it is made by hand. It doesn't have to look machined. So that looks pretty decent to me. It's got a bit of a tilt on it. So your alternative is to have a single one and have gap. I prefer to overload it, push that down into position, make sure that my finer gauge wire is going from the top to the top of the design. Rotate again 3 times around that inner curve. And that's 1, that's 2, push that into position, that's 3. I'm going to take that again across the back, making sure every time that we've completed those 3 little wraps that we give them a little bit of tension. Now if you want to do that without risking your nails, you can simply apply the tip of your pliers just to get that a little bit tighter. Naked pass of wire across the back of the design, push everything into position, make sure that your wires are sitting side by side, rotate around the outside. That's 1, that's 2, and that is 3. So you'll continue all the way up to the top. Now if you want to, you can pick a point. If we imagine this is the 12 o'clock and this is the 6 o'clock, you can pick a point on that straight line to add a different coloured bead. However, because I like my pendant to be made with negative space rather than more beads, I have chosen not to do that. One of the options that you can undertake if you desire is to go for a darker colour on one side to represent the yin, and then a lighter colour on the opposite side to represent the yang essence of the design. In which case you have an opportunity to take a single bead from here, pop it in position, and you'll find that when it feels right, you could even draw an image on a bit of paper, keep dropping your design down and checking where it will look best, add a single bead from the opposing side, and what you'll find is there is enough space in between each of these little sections of 3 weaves for you to put another 3 weaves. If you struggle, just simply make it 2 weaves and then everything will come together and all will be well with the world. You have the option, instead of using negative space, to use beads of a different colour, of an opposing colour. You could even go the whole colour wheel thing and do opposites. Absolutely up to you, but that is the essence of the Yin Yang Pendant design, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed the Yin Yang Pendant design with me today. You've got lots of options on how you can take that and make it your very own. Have yourself a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing you here again on the Gemhawks YouTube channel very, very soon. Bye for now.